so.
Yay. So, welcome everyone today to Ninjacorn podcast 11 episode and 11th episode with Koan. And yay, Koan, I cannot wait to deep dive more into our conversations today. A little bit about her, and please also fill in any gaps I'm missing, is you have a degree in psychology and you are super passionate about yoga right now. And so you've been also on track for getting your yoga teacher certification. You also have background in biofeedback and kind of the somatic yoga work and stuff like that, along with, of course, your hardcore meditation practice in your spiritual path. Yes. So today I kind of want to look into mental health with spirituality, some of these Buddhist practices that I'm sure we come across that maybe feel harmonious to mental health, and sometimes it maybe feels maybe disharmonious and jarring. So maybe we can maybe reconcile some of those pieces. Anything else I missed, Koan, that you wanted to share about yourself?
A lot of interests, a lot of questions, but let's talk about this today. I think it's totally on topic. I know you are a therapist,
Yes.
and you're one of the people that moved forward with that career, which I completely salute. I think that anyone working in mental health is an angel and a saint. So thank you. And I've had my own journey with it, and I just would love to hear more about yours too.
Sure.
I think that, there's such a beautiful unity between mental health, psychology, and spirituality. And yeah, happy to just talk about all the details, all the nuances.
Yeah. I think off the top, you're making me think of a question I'd love to ask you is, in all the years you've practiced meditation, which is how many years has it been now?
I mean, technically about 16.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Maybe you can just share with people who are listening, like what brought you onto like meditation practice, because it's so popular. Everyone comes onto the path for their own reasons.
Yes.
And then what kind of were like, oh, wait, mental health, this important thing as I'm doing this meditation thing.
So that's so funny. Okay, perfect segue because mental health brought me onto the meditation pathway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So at a younger age, I had an experience of PTSD.
Yes.
The Buddhist way of referring to it,
Yes, 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 yes.
The experience that arose, right?
Yes.
And it manifested in the form of panic attacks.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I had tried all these different methods. I tried different types of therapy and different resources to try to calm that and my mental health. And what I found was the one thing that worked was meditation. And specifically pranayama, so alternate nostril breathing, which I had learned from yoga.
Yes.
And that was the one tool that would always divert a panic attack. So
wow.
I remember the moment it kind of hit me when I was having a panic attack, and then I started alternate nostril breathing, and I sat down and I meditated so deeply for about 10 minutes, and it was gone. And this light bulb went off, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the answer. This is the way out of that suffering.
Wow.
And so then I started getting more and more into meditation, and I saw that my anxiety reduced and the circumstantial depression also reduced. And then I found my joy again, and I was able to feel more of this pure essence. Because I feel like meditation sort of peels off layers, in life and difficulty, layers get built on us as people through these experiences and
right.
and then through meditation, it's just peeling through these layers, and then you find your essence and your core, and then joy emerges again, and you realize what you're passionate about and what you want to do, energy. So for me, it was a very synchronistic relationship. So yeah, and then I also kind of actually came back to mental health after many years of meditating. Because I felt that there's actually very key aspects of psychology that have to be addressed for holistic balance. So I think it's very easy to get caught up in transcending and saying, I'm not this being. But psychology is honoring that you are a human. There is a unity to respecting this physical being who has a
Mm.
physical brain, who has a nervous system. And there is a really powerful unity to recognizing both the vastness of your soul and the configuration of you as a human being. So it's been this kind of big loop back around to a place where I feel like is much more balanced and unified than any prior place on my personal path.
Yes. No, I love that explanation because I know when I talked to Taria, in my years in training with her, she's like, it's almost like spirituality, meditation, and psychology can be on like opposite spectrums, right? Because the spiritual part, you're dissolving the self, you're dissolution, right? And then psychology, it's all about really understanding and honing in on the ego and like the self, and it's almost in some ways it can be strengthening the self,
Right.
as ways to look at it. So you're like, wait, I'm dissolving the self, now I'm strengthening it. I can't do both when I'm doing this sometimes.
Yes.
So what have you found that has been very holistically, balancing and harmonizing those maybe extremes? Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's so interesting because I think, spirituality and meditation offer so many benefits. You realize that you're not this self that is suffering. And that's the
Mhm.
most important part. You're not this self that is suffering. You are bigger than the self that is suffering. Um, but at a certain point, there is a spiritual trap that you could fall into where the experience of transcendence actually becomes an experience of aversion. So it's not transcending the self,
Right.
it's aversion to the self. And
Right.
in the Buddhist teachings, we always focus on practicing letting go of attachment and letting go of aversion.
Yes.
So I think at a certain point, to get up out of suffering and to get up out of the self, you have to pull yourself in that direction where you are realizing you're not the self. But at a certain point, you have to be really careful to make sure that doesn't turn into a version of the self. And
Mm.
there is a self that will always exist unless you're meditating in a cave and you never need to interact with anyone or the world.
Sure, sure.
Some sort of self that exists.
Right.
But through the practice of meditation, it can reconfigure into more like a tool or an operating system that helps you navigate the world. Um,
Mm.
and and there is sort of an honoring and respect for that. So there is really a kind of a beautiful unity where experiences arise and then they pass. Attachment is going into the experience. Aversion is running away from the experience.
Yes.
But true unity is allowing it to arise and allowing it to pass. It's not
Hmm.
fighting it once it arises. So I
Right.
think this is the spiritual trap is that when sometimes, and spiritual practitioners can experience this, if some pain or suffering arises, there's an aversion to it. And it says, no, 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 that's the self. I don't want it. It's bad. I'm that. And there's sort of a fighting with it.
Sure.
But by just honoring it and seeing it for what it is and acknowledging that we are super complex beings, super complex psychological beings in
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
physical body that have
Yeah.
these experiences, then they each become this beautiful gift. Even if it's painful and even if it's suffering, it becomes a beautiful gift that you honor and see for what it is. And
Hmm.
then when you're not fighting it and you're not attached to it, it dissolves on its own. So it's honoring what arises in the mind, which I think is a very deep way to practice it.
I love that. And I've shared before, when I first got onto this spiritual path and practice, it was also due to suffering, a lot of like emotional suffering. It was like the breakup of a relationship, trying to find my purpose, working career was still like up in arms and I was like a temp. So all these things that were just like not like really coalescing into something. I'm like, help me, and finding meditation and sitting in meditation with such this extreme amount of peace that would fill my being that it started as I progressed to be kind of this way out. It's like world is super intense, graduate school is super intense now, this, that, other relation. And it's like, okay, go meditate. get out. It's like my escape hatch, as Turia talks about it. She's like the escape hatch to go. But then as the meditation practice progresses after, the beginning stages and goes into intermediate stage, you realize like you have to come back in. And the coming back in is like the integration process, right? And that integration process is so necessary to be able to, I feel like, have that strength, that power as a way to, personal power as a way to talk about, to deal with the arising and falling that can sometimes feel really chaotic. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm in this like tsunami I can't manage. Because absolutely the rising and falling is always happening, and how we allow it to dissolve and honoring is the most ideal. But then the reality of life hits, and the rising is like, doesn't feel so I guess beautiful, or I don't know, separate. It feels so like someone's joking me. How am I gonna get all this good? It feels really intense sometimes. So would you agree?
Oh yeah, it's so intense. Yeah, so it's so interesting because I feel like through meditation I learned this peace and stillness.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
But then when you really engage with the world, sometimes it gets super intense, and sometimes things don't feel good, or they
Right.
knock you out. But the realization I've been coming to more recently is that um, enlightenment is not only the high experiences. It's not only those experiences of peace and balance and tranquility. It's
Right.
everything. It's
Yes.
absolutely everything. It's what's behind everything. So it's
Mm,
that
nice.
experiencing the high, peaceful experiences of emptiness and vastness, and it is that which is experiencing the pain and the suffering. So it is the consciousness behind it all. And any time
Yes.
that we're going into one, either getting attached to those high experiences and that tranquility, or aversion to the pain and
Yeah.
suffering, then we're just missing the mark a little bit. But it's such a subtle thing, it's such a dance.
So, do you have any like tips, insights from your experience or your practice that you can share with people who are listening, that kind of give them some maybe stepping stones of like, okay, yes, I get the overall concept. Don't be attached. Don't be averse. Let it all rise and fall, into the background of all that is. Um, when it can feel intense, or when it can feel really, I think the other piece is like intense and stuck are kind of the two things that come up for me as I look back on it's like, it's really intense. Like, how the F do I deal with this? Or I'm really stuck and there's like, nope, there's no fucking way I can get out of this. And your teacher's like, yes, you just got to put, you're like, nope, there's no fucking way I can get out of this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a cool question. I think there's different measures for different times. When I would say for stuck, personally for me, I
Yes.
like knowing your toolkit. So
Yes.
what helps you get unstuck, right?
Beautiful.
And there's always a shift in energy that can help you get unstuck. So there's always an option. For
Yes.
me personally, exercise is really helpful for that.
Yes.
And because so coming back to the relationship between the body and the mind,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what we don't realize is how much the body is affecting our mind.
So
And
true.
sometimes that feeling of being really stuck, or even things are too intense,
Mm-hmm.
can be part of a relationship with the body that we're not recognizing. So
Mm,
even something as simple as not getting a good night's sleep, it
yeah.
changes the way your neurotransmitters work. And it can make you more emotional, more impatient, and more volatile.
Mm-hmm.
So there's multiple aspects to this. One is mindfulness. So being
Yeah.
mindful of things arise, the spiritual practice, and another is honoring the body. So
Mm,
noticing what's happening in your physical world that you could shift. So knowing your tools, you can start with your body and say, okay, what in my physical world can help increase my energy, get me unstuck,
yeah.
getting your sleep, making sure
Mm-hmm.
you're hydrating, eating well, and diet and exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
by diet, I mean healthy foods.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
so, but I think that's a really important place to start, and I'd call that like a toolkit, because it's very simple and it has very visible results. So,
Yes.
when I when I hammer a nail, it goes in, right? There's a result. It's a tool. It does a thing. Um, and so the toolkit in the physical for me is like running or yoga. So if I'm
Yes.
feeling low, if I'm feeling stuck, I go on a run and I see a
Nice.
result. And that result is always more energy. It always
Yes.
works that way. It's what the
Yes.
tool is for. And that's kind of a very practical way to look at it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and on top of that, working with the inner workings of the mind and observing how you might have some limiting beliefs. So for getting unstuck, what I've been working on lately, if I feel stuck, is first check out my toolkit, and then I look for options. So what are the options here? Why do I feel stuck? Why do I believe these are the only options I have? Because that is kind of essentially what feeling stuck is. You're like, I'm limited in
Yes.
what I have in my
Yes. What I
realm
could
of
do.
possibility.
Yes.
So just get creative with options. Think about all the different possibilities. Think about, ways to shift your career or your relationships
Mm.
or your living situation, or even like move your room around,
Yeah, I
move
love
something
that.
over there, like change something in your environment, and
Mm-hmm.
your hobbies. Just try something totally different and see how that affects your mind. Because we definitely can get into patterns of mind that are related to our routines, and so shifting
Yes.
can help too. So yeah, getting unstuck is good.
I love that you mentioned the toolkit and toolbox because 100% agree with everything you named. And I really, really want to also add my support to that because it sounds so simple, it sounds so basic. And I think this is something I've shared before is, I'll be in a black belt workshop with my sensei in the martial arts class. And what does he always start with? The basics. And sometimes, the black belts have been there for decades longer than I have, maybe there's a subtle eye roll, like, oh, here we go again, basics, right? But then we leave that workshop like that was the basics, but the deep dive into that is so nuanced and subtle and so powerful. The basics are extremely powerful, right? So sleep, absolutely, food, hydration and yeah, body movement, stuff like that. I don't realize many times when I come back from training and I'm hungry, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And I'm like hungry, and then I'm hungrier, and then I'm hangrier, and then I'm like, what is going on? I can't get this done. It's like, well, you just eat something. It's like, no, I want to prepare this wonderful, great meal before I sit down and eat. And my husband didn't see me. He's like, why don't you just stop the suffering? I was like, oh, okay, isn't that easy? And it
Yeah.
really can be, right? Can be from that toolbox of things. And I love that. And yes, body movement, 100% support that. So going with the whole like creative piece in the mind, right? Of like looking at different options. I love the recommendations you shared. Like moving furniture around is wonderful. Changing routine is awesome. Sometimes I'll do that where it's like I'm driving to do like an errand or anything. I'm like, I'm going to go a different route. I'll drive a different route, right? Just to kind of feel that out. Drive a different route to go to class or whatever it is. And those things, I call them like contrary actions as a way of like voicing that in putting a label on it. Because there are things that we wouldn't normally do. It's contrary to what our usual pattern and routine is. But when we do it, it's like when I do it, at least, I feel like it has this opening um, of like energy, or like you could say it like a creativity like boost. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that park was over there when I drove in this path. Oh, I could probably go do a super cool run or walk over there, right? And then the creativity produces like more opportunities or possibilities, and that's where I feel like the magic is, right? Of like
Uh,
being unstuck. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also to tie it back to meditation,
Yeah.
what it does is it shifts your mind in a way that you said, you see new opportunities, new experiences,
Right.
new patterns. And the magic of that,
Yes.
that you realize that perhaps that stuck pattern you had been thinking is just a transient experience of a particular circumstance. And then in this different circumstance, you're having completely new experience and thoughts. And that's that reminder of, oh, I was not that thought pattern.
Right.
I was, maybe I was identifying with it. And that's
Right.
really where feeling stuck happens is you
Right.
say, I am this situation. I am these possibilities. I am these limitations. It's that attachment to that thought and that pattern and that experience. But when you shift something, then you have this reminder of, oh, there's this different way of experiencing things, these different thoughts. And then you realize I'm not that, I'm also not that. But you realize how flexible you are and you realize how transient experience
Yes.
then again anchors you back into the awareness that is experiencing them all.
Totally, right. And it brings about this fluidity into our ability to navigate life. And it makes me think of like a long time identity. I always kind of identified was growing up, I didn't feel like I was very athletic. It's like the sports I would join was like community sports you sign up for so you wouldn't get cut from the team and stuff like that. So it wasn't like I was like in nationals, going for championships. That wasn't my identity, back in the day.
That's surprising.
It's surprising, I know, right? I had the identity of like the nerdy geek. I carry my little violin case to go to orchestra classes and stuff
Yeah.
like
But
that.
then you went beyond that because you're, an Aikido black belt and
Right. So I'm sharing that to say it's like this so fascinating transformation that's occurred, right? Because I'll hang out with friends and like you just mentioned, you're like, what? Not athletic, right? These like jaw dropped facial expressions. Uh, and still I'll see that identity come up because I know for me, when like my dream all-time goal was like, okay, let me just get black belt, in Aikido. It's like, oh yes, please, please, pray to the genie gods, whatever martial art gods to make it happen. Got there, right? And then afterwards, when I was asked then to prep for my second degree black belt, I was like, it really, really went into the identity. Like the identity popped its head up again. It's like, oh, are you really a martial artist? I mean, that's kind of intense. Can you really do it? Like these questions, right? That perpetuates some self-doubt, right? Definitely brought up insecurities, right? And then and of course, fear of failure, right? Fear of looking dumb, and then really having to reconcile, like, well, all I ever really wanted was a black belt. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need to do this second test. And like watching this self,
oh,
yeah, be like holding me back in that place of, and I guess you would call that as a form of attachment, right? And then aversion to the second, you're like both what's happening
and
at the same
meanwhile, you
time.
could probably throw me across the room in reality, but your mind is like, don't know about this.
Totally. And so this was my huge like lesson in growth moving into that next degree belt piece. And I tell you, Koan, you have no idea how many times it's like, I don't think I need to take the test. I'm good. I just want to be black belt first degree. I just want to be able to go to sensei's black belt workshops. I was like totally comfortable, familiar, and in my comfort zone. It was so very apparent. It was so very apparent.
So you're a second degree black belt now, right?
Yes, second degree black belt now.
Finish the story.
Yes, I got there. And then like, and then the added other piece is I started running solely to supplement my meditation practice.
Ah,
Because as our root guru, Rama, Dr. Frederick Lentz, he had said this one line in one of his books, and I took it to heart. It was like, if you meditate and run every day, you can do anything.
right.
Full
Exactly.
stop, period. No, but if you checked it, it was just full stop. I was like, okay, are
Right.
you sure? Right.
Uh,
So I literally took that, and my teacher Turi is really big about taking things, tools, and having a personal experience around that in order to have your own kind of testimony and your own kind of personal power behind that piece. And so I took it and I put it to the test when I was doing grad school in SF. And I was doing a contrary action. I was like, crazy thing. To finish my time in SF, let me give myself something to remind SF for. So I'm going to sign up for an aquathon, which is this.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds awesome. Yeah.
It's a 2 event thing. So it's a swim and a run. So they drop you off at Alcatraz in the water and you swim, cross onto the beach, and then you run the 7-mile run up and over Golden Gate and back. So that was the event.
Wow.
And Koan, I was scared shitless to sign up for this thing. But I knew I told myself I wanted to do it before I left San Francisco and finished grad school.
Wow.
So I signed up for this thing. And I said my deepest, most heartfelt prayers to Rama, because I was like, Rama, please. Okay. You said if I meditate and run every single day, I can do anything. So I took that tool and I applied it as the soul defining thing to do this event. Like that's all, like I would, train martial arts and stuff like that. And I would go into the pool and I'd swim my laps and everything like that. But I was like, if I really hone in on meditating and running every day, I swear to God, there were days that I did not want to run, but let me just tell you, I did because I was scared crapless of not doing this event.
Amazing.
And I even went to the extreme, Koan. I didn't invite any friends, family members, or anything like that to it because I was so deeply scared that I was going to fail. And I didn't want anybody I just wanted to do it on my own. And if I couldn't finish or whatever, it's like, okay, well, I tried, kind of thing. Well, I finished, right? And it was super amazing, right? And life-changing. And even with that, Koan, is that crazy? I'll still have this niggling mint. It's like, am I athletic? I don't know. I think I'm just nerdy.
How the mind will just like try to convince you reality is not reality. It's like, no.
Right? Can you relate? Can you relate? Can you share your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, and as you were speaking, I had a little light bulb because I was listening to a podcast the other day with a neuroscientist, and he was talking about this particular part of the brain.
Yes.
Do you
No, I don't know. I don't know. What is it?
I don't have all the details. I'd have to resurface the podcast for you, but he talked about a particular part of the brain that isn't very deeply studied, but what they've noticed is that it is larger in people who do things they don't want to do.
Oh.
And they were talking specifically about Floyd Mayweather, who's a 46-year-old boxer, and he is still one of the best boxers, and he defeats 20-year-olds regularly. And so, it was an interesting conversation because how does someone who's 46, who typically is so much older and is aged out of the sport,
aged out,
could defeat people so young and just consistently be so good? But they said that they started doing studies on athletes and they noticed that this particular part of the brain was enlarged. And they don't know exactly everything that it does, but they know that when people push themselves beyond their limits and when they do things specifically that they don't want to do. So, for example, if you love running, it might not work, but you have to not want to run and not love running and
me.
Then it works. But he was saying this part of the brain is amazing and actually creates what they call super agers, people that are genetically much younger than their physical body. So good job.
No wonder.
So the reason I love this is because there is a science to pushing your comfort zones and pushing beyond what you want to do. As long as it's safe, not advocating hurting yourself, absolutely do it in a smart and safe way.
Yes.
But there is a scientific benefit to it that's measurable, which I found such an aha moment because I knew that was a part of our practice too, is like always pushing beyond yourself, pushing beyond what you can do. But here was a scientific piece that clicked into place and was, the proof in the pudding, I just love because I'm like, yes, I trust that the spiritual practice works, but there's real impact behind it physically. So I just wanted to say that because as you're speaking, I'm like, okay, boom, this is exactly what you're talking about, this spiritual practice that's changing your brain for the better, 100%. For you to be a healthier, stronger, longer living person. So that's amazing. Congratulations. Hats off. I love running, and that sounds pretty wild to me.
Doing the whole aquathon thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're
So good
so
job. And the second degree black belt. That's amazing. Um,
you're so
that's
funny.
so cool. Okay, so the interesting way I can relate is actually
Hmm.
it's actually almost the inverse, which is
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
interesting.
Let's hear it.
Because growing up I was extremely athletic. And
I knew I had you on this podcast for a reason.
so, I had an older brother and I was always playing sports with like boys, multiple years older than me. And I was playing football, soccer, basketball, like volleyball. I was on all the teams and I
Oh
loved
my God.
uh, so I
Wow.
identified with that. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but here's the interesting inverse of it is that when I
Yeah.
was in my early 20s, I got into everything. I got into rock climbing, yoga, dancing. Um,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and so as an adult, I was dancing
Yes.
and I tore a hamstring.
Mm.
And then I also kind of around that time, a little bit before, let me back up a little bit. I was
Yeah.
rock
Yeah.
climbing like crazy, and I got
Wow.
tendonitis in my wrists.
Ooh.
So I had to stop rock climbing, which was
Yep.
really hard for me because
Yeah.
I had an attachment to it. I was
Mm.
attached to that identity. So to not be able to do it was a huge challenge to my ego.
Oh yeah.
Made me really sad. So
Loss.
when I
Yeah.
couldn't rock climb anymore, I
Mm.
started dancing because I was like, okay,
Okay.
well, I can't, pull myself up anymore.
Mm.
So I got into dance. Then
Mhm.
my overexuberance again, I tore a hamstring.
Oof.
So then I couldn't dance. And I could
Oh,
barely do yoga too, or I could only do certain things. But
wow.
every time I had an obstacle, I would just go into something else. But the
Mhm.
interesting inverse that happened is that I was so attached to that identity
Yeah.
that losing it was a huge blow. And it made me really, really sad.
Of
I was
course.
totally depressed,
Of
both when I got
course.
tendinitis and when I tore my
Of
hamstring.
course.
And, it takes years to heal fully from some of these things.
Wow.
So what I had to practice was letting go of that and
Yeah.
actually really starting a yoga practice where the true intention of yoga is unity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The pose you can do, it's not how fit you are. It's not
Mm.
the end result. It's experiencing unity of body and mind. And so that was my
Mm.
healing savior when I realized that I can have a physical practice that is healthy but in a way that is unified in my spirit and not in a way that's
Mm.
goal oriented, which is how I used to be. So it was like the
Yeah.
universe ripped away that attachment, and I had to
Um,
learn a different way to come into balance with that.
wow. Powerful. Yes. And injuries. Oh my gosh. Bless people who have any kind of injuries. That is so hard, right? It's absolutely a grief and loss that you have to like grieve through. And so now maybe can you share what your yoga physical practice looks like with those injuries you had, like and the wrist, like chaturanga? How do you in the downward dog? How do you do that?
Yeah, well, it's been years, so maybe like a
Yeah.
few years past
Yeah.
since the
Yeah.
injuries.
Yeah.
So they have generally healed up. And what I found is that there is a way to practice that is always uplifting. And that the
Mm-hmm.
problem with my practice was in my mind. The problem
Mm-hmm.
was I was pushing beyond my limits. I had goals in mind. I was like, I need to climb the hardest route. I need to do the splits as fast as I can.
My gosh.
I had these extreme goals in mind, and I was
Oh yeah.
practicing with that goal attachment. And the enthusiasm is great, but that's how you hurt yourself, and that's how you go out. So for me, I'm learning these practices again. I'm actually learning handstands now, which I had never been able to do because of my wrists.
Sure.
And my practice is sustainable and balanced. And I simply do what I can do what you can do without a panic, which is what my yoga teacher says. And it's so good. So she Tara Stiles, her name, she does Strala yoga, and she teaches this really beautiful way of doing yoga that is so unity based. It is not goal oriented, but through
Wow.
the process of just doing what you can with ease, you end up being able to do much, much more, which
Oh,
is really a metaphor for a lot of life where the problem is not the practice. The problem is your mind and how you engage with the practice. because you can always engage with the practice in a way that is uplifting and a perfect balance between pushing yourself and listening to your body. And what I realized on my particular spectrum, what I needed to come into harmony with was listening, being in complete presence, letting go of that like push energy, letting go of that goal oriented energy. And then what emerges is something that is beautiful and sustainable and nourishes you and is healthy for you. But I think
Wow.
everybody comes with a different configuration. So maybe
Sure.
some people could push themselves a little more if they,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
you know, have
Sure. Yes,
that
yes,
energy.
yes.
So
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
about personal practice, right? And
Right.
personal engagement with the practice.
But oh, thank you for sharing your yoga teacher. Maybe if you have a link and stuff like that to her stuff, we can put it in the show notes,
Yeah.
for people who are listening. Yeah, to kind of maybe get and look into a sense of what this harmonious unifying yoga looks like. I'm very curious myself too. And when you're talking about this movement that is what's right for your body, which is very individual, makes me think of my sensei, because what he is working on with all of us, because in martial arts there's a lot of power, right? And when you build up your belt rank, guess what, everyone's like, more power. It starts to look like everyone got Hulk muscles and they go around just and
Yeah.
it's not, it can be effective, don't get me wrong, it can be effective, but for, like you're talking about, for the long sustainability, for my practice and art of martial arts, it's really, I find this self personal refinement piece, right? And when you hulk yourself up, you only can develop to a certain level. It has its limitations, right?
Absolutely.
And that's like, I feel, taking one tool out of your tool set and taking the hammer to do everything. And you're like, now I'm gonna go work on my Mercedes and I'm gonna go with and people are like, oh, whoa, 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 like
But the
maybe.
hammer can only move like this, right? Like just one limited movement because it's constricted.
And sometimes with more refined things, I say, like a Mercedes, like a higher end car, like you don't necessarily, you have to have more refinement of the tools going into fixing that also, right? It's like it's correlates in that way. So Sensei has been working with us of this motion space concept of, it's so easy when we want to apply force to something, an external force to an opponent, we want to apply all that force and just really Hulk smash it. And how do we do so in a way where we are honoring our motion space that's within, and we're not overreaching, not overstretching? It's like, it sounds ridiculous, but if you think of like the Japanese samurai sword cut, can you imagine someone overreaching? It's not natural, right? And actually, it diminishes the effectiveness of the sword cut, right? Because just angling and physics and stuff like that, I don't know all the details around it.
Yeah.
So he's been really working with all of us, of this, how do we move within our motion space of our body where it's comfortable, right? But from this comfort of place, we have our whole body unified. So it's very powerful to then address this external, attack or grab or whatever it is externally. And it's a huge mental discipline, and that ties with the body, because I don't know about you, like maybe you can't understand with the goal oriented, I just want to go that much more, you just want to push. And when you do that, we hit, well, at least when I train with kind of the other black belts, the sensitivity obviously is a little bit more attuned. So when I do try to do extra, they'll stop me, they're like, nope, you put too much muscle into that. You didn't come at it with your whole body in this very holistic way that's very harmonious. And when I actually do that, it feels, like you said, probably in your yoga practice, very peaceful, very sustainable, very healthy, effortless, almost, dare I say. Is that, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's the magic of Aikido, particularly, right? It's
Mm,
this really full body movement, effortless, using the
mm,
opponent's energy
yeah.
to manipulate them. So that's
Yes.
beautiful. We need to do Aikido sometime.
Yes.
Practice with you.
Yes.
Um,
Go practice.
so yeah, a couple things came up while you were talking, and
Mm-hmm.
one was that Bruce Lee
Oh,
was notoriously one of the best martial artists of all time.
yes.
He wasn't a super bulky guy,
Yeah.
actually. He,
Yeah.
he was very toned when he would flex. You see him just pictures of him all relaxed, not a big guy.
Mm,
But he was extremely dense and extremely flexible. So
mm.
his power was in his flexibility, and it gives you so much more range of motion. And I think that's so amazing. And he absolutely was one of the first martial artists to bring that into the West. I,
Yes.
boxing and stuff,
Yes. Yes.
a lot of macho man attitude, but
Yes.
he showed men that were much bigger and bulkier than him how strong you could be just with sheer flexibility and sheer,
Yes.
you know, technique. Um,
Yes.
and also with the sword cutting, I love that you brought that up.
Well,
So have you done Iaido before, the bamboo cutting?
I did it once when we were on this last Japan trip with my
You
sensei.
did it. That's so cool.
It
So
was
I did the
amazing.
same workshop years ago.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah,
but like you said, it's so beautiful because if you try to force it, it doesn't work. It's that angle, figuring out the right angle and the right um fluidity,
yeah.
it's using gravity and using
Yes.
angles and
Yes.
using technical spatial awareness. So I love that so much. And yeah,
Which comes from the body of the person executing that sort, right? Yes.
right. Yes, yeah, because it's an extension. So you have to have that perfect angle. I bet you were
Right.
good at it.
Thank you.
So cool. Yeah, absolutely. And similar, yeah, similar with yoga, because I've also practiced martial arts too.
Yes.
And I feel like it totally served me to a certain point.
Yeah.
Um, but I definitely felt a calling to start practicing yoga, and I see a whole opportunity to share it as well. But what I
Mm.
see is that the yoga can inform the martial arts. So I
Oh.
have this new idea.
Ooh, I want to hear.
I call it Taekwondoga. I mean, I'm just goofing, but I'm studying yoga, but I have a martial arts community. So my
Yes.
idea is to
Yeah.
teach yoga to martial artists. So in
Yes.
a
Yes.
way that you can increase flexibility, increase body awareness in some ways, and increase balance, because that's something that
Yes.
they both really, really have in common.
Yes.
Is when you have this really clear center of balance and you know how to move around it, then
Yes.
everything becomes more easy and more fluid. So in martial arts, you have that center of balance, you can manipulate the world around it.
Yes.
And in yoga, you have the center of balance and you manipulate your own body around it.
Right. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear more and collaborate and just hear more. You're like a fly on the wall for class. How's this gonna go down? Yes, I totally. Okay, so what is this Taekwondo? I'm kidding.
Okay, I'm being goofy
High
now.
level, high
I,
level.
I was practicing some
Yeah.
balancing techniques,
Yes.
and what I realized was that these could be super helpful to people practicing karate. And in Taekwondo, they have certain exercises where you practice these leg lifts, and that's how
Oh,
they get
okay.
those really high kicks.
Okay. Yes.
I was doing a similar pose in yoga, but there's a sequence of balancing where you're on one leg and you bring
Mm.
your knee up in front of you, you stretch your leg out, and then you
Yes.
switch it behind and go into
Yes.
like a warrior three, and then
Yes.
you bring it back, and it's just sort of rocking back and forth all over one leg.
Oh,
Um,
right.
what it does is it develops this really grounded sense of balance, and then it strengthens these muscles in your legs and hips that allow you to do these different things. And
Sure.
it was when I was going into Warrior 3 and I realized, oh, this is kind of like a back kick. And, I
Oh,
was
yeah.
a
I
different
got.
um, kind of knee opening, hip opening pose. And I said, oh, this is kind of like a chamber. This is like a karate chamber.
Ah, I love
Um,
it.
and
I love it.
that's when I was realizing that it might be really helpful, and so that I,
Yes.
connect with my martial arts friends and teach them some of the things that I learned, and hopefully it can improve. Because
Yes.
as much as you drill technique, there are really subtle aspects of balancing muscles that are only exercised when you do those particular balance poses. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm excited
Oh,
about
it makes me think of it. I don't know. This might be way too like out there. High level is Sensei has been sharing this aspect of body condition
it. Hmm.
where he'll lead us through a very specific warm up, and the whole warm up is really not looking like any. usual warm up of like stretches. It's really about tuning into a body condition to help us have this unity. It feels like when I go through his warm up, it feels like if I've been in my head a little bit or I'm kind of in my front body awareness, it encapsulates my back and then kind of the ground and the earth. And just it kind of fuses the very holistic whole being to be able, and he'll do muscle testing to kind of show us like how we have been connected into our body versus when we first started class. It's really fascinating and really amazing. You should come to a class. Come on. You should come visit.
Ah, sure. I've never done Aikido before, but sounds
It's okay. You'll be great. You'll be fine. You have so much athletic experience. You will be fine.
I just I just stretch and roll around on the floor these days. No, I'm just kidding. I love it.
It's like teaching. But going back to what you're saying, this like strengthening and the balance piece, I've come to now really start to tune in more of when I'm doing activities, even around my house or even going for a run, how whole body connected am I? What is my body condition? Because I think that also, I feel like is it definitely a mindfulness practice, but also potential for people who get injured, right? Because if we don't have that correct body condition from that mindful awareness, then absolutely injuries happen. You're like, oh, yeah, it just makes me cringe.
And it's not only a mindfulness practice, it's also it affects your mind too, which is really
Yes.
interesting because it is a mindfulness practice to be aware of your body. And then if you take it a step further,
Yes.
notice how your body position is affecting your mind. So I think that's super
So
interesting.
much. Yes.
They talk about like power poses,
Uh-huh.
and they say that if you adopt a certain pose or do something early in the morning that you feel more invigorated, um,
Uh-huh.
or there's a victory pose they talk about that just lifts you up.
Mm.
So that and also posture, how you're holding yourself. It's
Yes.
this feedback loop. So there's the mind noticing the body and then the body informing the mind. And it creates this loop of information that will just perpetuate unless you're aware of it. And so I think posture is really interesting, noticing how maybe you tend to shift to one side. Maybe you tend to close your heart, or
Mm.
maybe you tend to stick it out too much, whatever
Yes.
your particular configuration is, how that informs your mind and learning to be fluid with that too.
Do you notice that in just your own self-awareness with yoga poses when you are like, okay, I'm opening my heart too much or my chest and just kind of the posture alignment stuff?
Yeah, and I think this
Yeah.
gets really into the somatics of it too,
Yes.
because there's multiple things that affect our body positioning and our posture. And some of it is just life experience. So, for example, from rock climbing, I have certain muscles developed that are just there. So my
Uh-huh.
body sits in certain ways. But it also has to do with our mental patterns. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's very common to notice where certain parts of your body are more closed or more open based on your thought patterns and experiences.
Uh-huh.
So for me, I have the awareness that I tend to be a little bit more in fight mode, which is why I'm exploring yoga so deeply now, because for me in my personal practice, it's actually more challenging to be soft and opening than it is
Yes,
to be
of course.
so for me, this is my personal challenge, and
Yeah.
and that can come from years of martial arts as well. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a mindfulness practice where I notice it, and then I also notice it when throughout my day. I'm like, am I guarding for some reason? I don't have to guard. I can just soften and open my heart.
Oh, fascinating.
Yes, yeah.
How do you know you're guarding? Just for people who are listening, they're like, wait, maybe I do that.
Yeah,
What does it feel like for you when it's in your body?
yeah. So for me, guarding, it's mostly in the shoulders. And
Uh,
there is a bit of a rolling forward. So the ribs are there to protect the heart. Yeah. Well, I'm calling it guarding too, because, in karate or martial arts, you have your guard, and that's a very
uh,
common posture. And it's also kind of common to like tuck your chin down a little bit.
Yes.
Um, so, unlearning years of that, because
Wow.
it generally makes you predisposed to be ready for attack. Like
Fine. Yes, I
in
know.
your face. And so what you have to do is like acknowledge like, oh, I'm in a safe space. My nervous system can totally calm down. I can be open because your heart is the most vulnerable organ in your body. So
Right.
when we guard, we cover it, whether it's with our ribs or with our wrists. And in yoga, you learn to open it and to soften it. So it's a really beautiful balance between the two because power is important too. Um,
Yeah.
Bruce Lee said, always tense. No, sorry, always never tense. Always ready, never tense.
Yes.
So
Yes. I love that.
always be
Yeah.
ready, but never tense.
Right.
And that is that relaxation,
That's
softness,
right. That's
uh,
right.
but you can respond. So it's like responding perfectly in the moment to what's happening.
Yes.
If there was a threat, you could respond, but acknowledging when you're safe and when you can relax.
Yes. And just to kind of take that kind of guard stance to even more basic thing is what I'll do like walks around my neighborhood in between the workday or just a transition from my workday, I will notice how I start my walk, right? And what that feels like after a day of work, sitting, meet sessions, whatever it is, and then how it feels by the end of my walk. But of course, I do hold intention in my walk to be very mindful. So I am mindfully adjusting, right? Letting go of the guard, like, kind of sign to kind of sink a little bit into my center to kind of just allow the hips to carry the weight, right? And move forward and walk and just have a little more ease. But I always feel so much different after I just walk. It can even be like 10 minutes. I tell my clients, sometimes it's ridiculous. I was like, just to kind of shift that somatic mind thing, go down the block and come back. And
Exactly.
I've done that before and I felt stupid because I was like, if my neighbors are looking at me, they're like, who is this lady going down the block and back? But I don't care. I can't care. The feeling is more important. This well-being is more important. Right.
Totally. Yeah.
Right.
That's so funny. I went on a walk recently
Yeah.
and I was walking with some friends and we heard this crashing in the distance.
Oh no.
And there's pigs in Hawaii. And so they were like, like, I think it's some pigs. Um, and it was
Oh,
really funny because I noticed that my response was like guard mode. And I was instantly like,
wow.
my friend was like, are you gonna like fight a pig? Like, what are you planning on? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. And she's like, let's just walk away. And I'm like, okay, totally. So
You're
it was
hilarious.
so funny because these things still come up, right? And then I kind of like laughed at myself and I had like gripped a chair. There was a chair and I was like, wait, what am I? I'm like, am I gonna just like throw a chair at a pig? I'm like, this is ridiculous. I could just walk away. But pigs are cute and shy here, and so, but it's funny how these little like nervous system responses is just like threat, respond this way. So it's definitely like a constant mindfulness practice of just being aware that you are, um, you know, you're in control of the state of your nervous system through your body and through your mind and your spiritual practice.
So the funny story I have on that, like guard, because I absolutely have that, like not just years of martial arts practice, but I feel like past lives of a lot of warriorness, right? Um, this thinking it starts to perpetuate. And the funny story around that is in our house, right? Windows open. And then at night, I like the blinds to be closed. And my brother-in-law was visiting. We're in the kitchen making dinner and it's dark outside, right? And all the windows are open. And I go to close all the blinds. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm closing the blinds. He's like, why? I was like, because if there was a sniper out there, they would see us and they get us. It's like straight shot in.
Yeah.
Come back because he was just being playful and smarty pants with me. He's like, but then you close the blinds, I can't see the troops coming in. I was like, it's gonna be too late. I go, the snipers already have gotten us. So we were legit having this debate in the kitchen on some like random summer night in California. Like, what sniper, what troops? But that was seriously my being.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, that's the funny thing too is kind of embracing that we each have these unique configurations, right? This unique personality, this past life profile or epigenetic profile, even,
Yes.
how our ancestors affected our genetics and our brain
Yes.
today. But it is funny, and it's fun to be able to laugh at it and not go too far into it and just recognize, okay, that is so silly. And also I love it because one of the best ways to overcome karmas is to laugh at yourself, in my opinion.
Yes, 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 yes.
Say like, wow,
Oh, I love
that
it.
was silly, or just kind of not take yourself so seriously. So I think that's
Yeah.
very beautiful.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm trying to think. And you had said you had a question for me. I don't know if that was a question you want
I
to ask.
did, yeah.
Oh yeah, what do you want to ask?
So my question was about your career as a therapist.
Mhm.
Because I was in the process of getting my MFT back in the day, and
Yeah,
I changed careers. And I completely admire anyone that works in mental health. I think it's such a valid, such a needed service. So my
100%.
question for you is, where does your infinite well of compassion come from? Or how do you work with that? Because that's it is absolutely a compassion profession. So how
Mm.
do you work with self-compassion and compassion for others and work that into your livelihood, if that makes sense?
Wow, Koan, good question. Oh, I don't know if I've been asked that question before. Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking that question. Just a little bit background of what got me into the work was, and I don't know if you know about this or other people have heard, is I ended up feeling very inspired to go to China. This was like a decade plus ago, to go volunteer my time with the babies and the kids in the orphanages over there. And I think the draw was, I'm Asian and I can speak Mandarin, so I had this like line to be able to go there and have some mobility to converse and work with people there. And at that time, they had the one child policy, and so families were only allowed to have one child. And what it started perpetuating was a lot of the females, right, would then be discarded in the orphanages because they wouldn't be able to pass on the family name. And if there was any kind of physical defect, the kids were also left in the orphanage. And it sounds so heartbreaking. And it was a life-changing trip. I learned so much there. And the takeaway from that was it called within me this deep longing to want to be of service in some way to beings. And at that time I was like, kids, I want to really focus on kids. So I came back into the States, did the whole degree and everything like that, worked in some school facilities and stuff like that. But I found myself really frustrated because I felt my hands were tied behind my back trying to work with these kids because the teachers would have a say in it, the parents would have a say in it, the principal, the school would have a say in it. It's like, oh, Johnny is creating fights and I'm like, oh, and then the teacher's like, he's not doing his homework. And I'm like, oh, and I was like, but I just want to be with these beautiful beings and just really, have this time for healing that really didn't really have a space for it because it was like they need to achieve, grade, all these expectations around school. So I ended up finding myself working with combat vets. And I super enjoyed that work because even though they would call me a civilian, so like military organizations have a lot of acronyms, and then you're always like other, because if you're not boots on the ground with the army people or the like was the army and navy, then like air force or like I mean there's all these like organizations, but anyways, so from that work that really tied me more into the PTSD world, right, of a lot of trauma piece with a lot of the combat vets who had seen like combat theater and stuff like that. It was really intense, and so that super connected me with them through my martial arts practice, right? Because it was this warrior mentality in this, and I could totally relate. And I love that work. And from there, it pinged out into substance recovery because a lot of PTSD, a lot of the kind of the self-medicating, self-soothing pieces that were unhealthy was, gone through like alcohol and drugs. So then I went into this vein. I never would have thought I would find myself in that population I was working with. But I found that in working with those individuals, they're just like me. I mean, if I'm just being super honest. And what I mean by that is like they all have tremendous big hearts, right? And this, because a lot of them, whether it's in combat vet, like being of service or substance, there's usually a deep wanting to be of service, like help, right? And also, or on the substance side, a lot of deep caring for family members, loved ones, and the world in general. But all that open-heartedness is so opening that what I feel like on as a way of talking about it, overwhelms, right? And overstimulates. And without that grounding of like a practice or personal power, it just spins people out, right? And creates mental health issues, substance abuse issues, right? Is what I've seen. So then it gave me this opportunity to insert and share meditation practice with all of them, right? As a grounding tool. And how this all goes back to your question about the self-compassion is, I feel in the beginning it was spurred on from that deep wish to not see beings suffer through the kids, right, in China. And as it's continued, it's deepened my own practice within myself, because there were absolute moments where I was telling this to one of my clients at this session, I had to reconcile like how I couldn't save these people, because my deepest wish was not to have these people suffer. So then this savior complex comes out, right? Because I'm gonna save them, right? With all this warrior martialness, it's like, I won't kill all of them, so you will be safe, right? And that guarding was very strong. And then, there was like a tipping point of working with clients that it's like all this pain, all this suffering, I realized was absolutely not sustainable if I carried it onto my being, right? It was totally not sustainable. And that's where the grace of my practice came into the piece, because I was like, oh, I don't have to carry it all. Eternity can hold it all, right? And when eternity can hold it all like that, I didn't have to cling or grasp to want to save or have to remember very specific things. Because I felt like if I didn't see this client and I had a large caseload, I'm like, oh my God, if I don't see him and remember every exact thing, like I wouldn't be that proper therapist to give care and support. But in that faith, I guess is the way you call it, and that trust in eternity that they would hold it. It really like refined and up-leveled my practice of being a therapist, right? Because I could just be present with the individual and it would just like eternity be like, oh, this is what you need. I was like, oh, thank you. I don't know, as a way of talking about it, right? And from that, just letting go of that identity, and also very much a very ego prideful identity that I think I could save someone, and speaking to that with clients, because I mean, how often when people are suffering and they see you as a healer of some sort, they're like, save me, help me, like release me of the pain, of course. And oh my gosh, those cries are, is like a bodhisattva or like, goddess Tara hearing those cries, like the compassion that spews forth, right? And how to speak to like, okay, like, remember, I don't save. And when I say that, my clients are like, what are you talking about? You don't save me. Like, why am I here then, right? But the clarification is, no, I don't save. I'm here to support, guide, coach, whatever it is you need, encourage. You are the one that can make the choice to save. It's between you and I feel like it's your choice, right? And that empowering piece, it's between you and eternity, or you and God, or whatever that word is you want to say, right? And because when people come in with these crisis situations and feel suicidal and feel so hopeless and despairing that they don't feel like there's any point, holy shit, is it painful to hold in my heart, right? But then to be able to remind them, like, okay, that really hurts me to hear you say that. Let's create a safety plan, all the professional things, right? And you have that choice to choose what you want to do next, right? And it's the scariest thing to do, I guess, or speak to in session. But also, I feel like it's so empowering to help people remember. And a lot of times, I'll also share, I don't know if you heard this story, but there's this Buddhist story where, people don't even realize how precious this life is. And just to put it in a context of the preciousness of it is, imagine the vastness of the ocean. And there's this one turtle swimming in the ocean. Okay. And every 100 years, it pops its head up to just get a breath of fresh air, whatever it is, it does. Just every 100 years, it does that. And in this vastness of the ocean, there's this wooden ring just floating in the ocean randomly. And the probability of every 100 years for the turtle to peep its head up on the surface and be able to put its head through that one wooden ring is how precious our life is, because that's how, those are all the conditions that need to come together in order for a life to be born. And I was like, right? So when people, when my clients are in despair and thinking like the hopelessness of life and living, I will share this story with them and have them consider, like, okay, this is the preciousness of your life, and this is your choice. What do you choose to do? And then letting it go in such a way of letting eternity, it not letting go like abandon, like letting it go to like let go of trying to control the situation, to allow eternity to kind of like support that. And then however I can come in to add to that, has continued to fuel the practice. And I'm totally going off tangent. Sorry, off of your question piece, but so as these pieces along this journey of being a therapist, it has really honed my own practice and refined myself, of having me to look at what my identities are, what aren't healthy and sustainable, how to let go of that, how to reconcile those pieces while still being of service to these clients. And now, more than anything, the next level is the deepening of my own self-care practice, right? Meditation, martial arts, walking, playing the piano, anything, right? That fuels me, I recognize is of utmost importance, so that I have the fuel to also generate into my sessions with clients, right? And I know part of the very get-go in being a therapist, they're like, don't forget your self-care, don't forget your self-care, do self-care. But it's very easy to say, and it's a different realm when you have to implement it into your life. Because it's easy to go back to back to back to sessions, and then you're like, oh, let me just take another extra session. They're in crisis, let me help them. So you're help, 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 help. And then all of a sudden you like eat something, you're like a little bit dazed, and you're like, go to sleep. It's like not healthy, right? And so you could probably say I was kind of militaristic with my practice in the very beginning. Meditation, I was really strict with morning and evening seated meditation practice, and not missing a day. That was something that was inspired from my like mentor from the very, very early days. She had been training for like decades, and she's like, I've never missed a single day of meditation. I was like, what does that even mean? Because I came from this world that was not so consistent, that didn't have that discipline, right? And I took it upon myself to apply that same discipline, which for me was very empowering, right? And that empowerment helped to fuel all the work, all the people time, the caring time, the healing time. And I love my work. I feel really blessed about that. I feel really grateful that it feels sustainable, I think, is the beautiful thing, because burnout is real. People do have to take time off in this industry. And I totally take that as a soul blessing. I call it a blessing and a curse from Rama, the guru. And I say it as in a tongue-in-cheek blessing and curse because it's a blessing because I feel I gained so much from it. But I also feel like it's my curse as a way of saying it because of all my past life profile of the war and martial artist. And I feel in so many past lives before, I made a deep promise that I did not want to harm, I did not want to kill anymore, right? And therefore, the other side of that was like, oh, then you will heal what has been harmed. You will,
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, so, and that was one big thing I struggled with, to like moments of tearfulness when I was actually training for my first degree black belt test because it felt so much like I had to draw upon this like warrior piece that felt very much like I had to go into kill mode, right? And it was really, I was having some real internal struggles with that. I mean, I would literally finish training, prepping for my belt test, drive home in tears because I was like, I don't want to hurt
Oh,
this. This is not. But then I wanted the black belts. Reconcile all of that. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. But yeah. So does that answer your question?
that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay.
Wow. So I heard so much. So as
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
speaking, I heard first a deep unity with others, this
Mm.
feeling that, you and others are the same,
Yeah.
whatever their life circumstances are, wherever they ended up, in whatever condition of physical
Yes.
state, there is a sameness there that you really
Absolutely.
saw this sameness. And then I heard a deep connection with eternity, and where when you practice, you're being a window into eternity for the
Yeah.
client. You're being this window into the universe and allowing it to support them. So it's not you supporting them, you're allowing the universe to support them.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's a selfless practice. So you had to step out of the way because it's too much suffering for one person, right?
Yeah.
So you became the universe and allows that to support them. And as you were speaking, I felt that you opened up this window into eternity and you presented
Oh,
it. And it was so beautiful. It was empty and vast and full at the same,
yeah.
just, full of love. And that really blows my mind in deep states of meditation with the universe and selflessness, which is what your practice also is. It's both completely empty and completely full of love.
Yeah.
And that's what you shared. So thank you so much.
Oh, wow. What a beautiful summary. I'm like in tears.
I'm in tears. Yeah,
Oh,
beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful service, and thank you. And I didn't want to foreshadow this, but that was one of the reasons that I changed my career, is that I got to the point of it being too much for one person. And I was very young at the time, so I
yes.
didn't build practice. So I'm so inspired and uh, in awe of, how you have been able to take it to that next level where it really is the universe doing the work. It's
Yeah.
complete act of selflessness and giving to others.
Thank you. Oh, Koan. Thank you
Oh,
so much for
thank you.
spending time with me. I super enjoyed it today. Had
Well,
had no expectations and just knew we were going to talk about, meditation and mental health. Did you have any last thoughts, last tips, don't forget this for people who are listening?
I think your summary of your infinite well of compassion in the universe was the perfect final thoughts. So we can
Oh,
leave it there.
okay. Yay.
But thank you so much. This is so fun to talk about life and the spiritual practice and get all the different perspectives. It's
I
it's
love it.
it's like that oneness that you felt with everyone in the beginning of your practice. There's a oneness and there's a uniqueness that is really special. It's
It
like
is really special.
to hear other people's perspectives. So
I'm fascinated by that. I just love it to know all this, inquiry of like, what's your practice like? What's been like for you? I don't know. I get really curious about that stuff. Yeah.
and, oh, thank you so much. Ah,
Ah.